resistance isn't wrong, it's just unnecessary. Because what's truth is that we're loving beings. And that's the truth. That is the truth. But we go into these modes of wanting things our way or somehow feeling as though things are not quite right, judging the world as being insufficient, as a scary place. So as a result of it, we have to have our boundaries of control that make the world, safer for us. But in doing that, all we're doing is creating more resistance and more suffering for ourselves.
I'm your host, Kim Hines, and welcome to the Emotional Eats podcast. I'm on a mission to show you that what you consume, not just the food, affects your entire life. Midlife is different. Let's dig into the real reasons why you eat when you're not hungry and why you're not feeling well. My guests and I are going to give you doable solutions and help you let go of perfectionism, food rules, and stress to make changes that will last a lifetime. If you're ready to ditch old school diet culture and nourish your entire life, this is the show for you. Welcome to episode 65 of the Emotional Eats podcast, and welcome to season 2. I read a book called Uncovering and Embracing Soul Power by Edward Miller, and I'm really excited that he accepted my invitation to be on the episode. He is going to be your guide today to exploring your inner path to joy, prosperity, self-love, and peace. So if you'd like to awaken that self-love, improve relationships, improve your relationship with yourself, and even eliminate some of the suffering you feel because of lack of self-worth, this is the episode for you. And I love how Edward explains Ho'oponopono, which is a Hawaiian practice and a mantra, and he shares how it helped him develop a more compassionate relationship with himself and how you can use it too. We have a great and open conversation about Edward's past struggles with food and body image because, as you know, this podcast focuses on helping you with your relationship with food, and it's not always just about food. Edward shares how his spiritual growth changed his relationship with eating. And we also talk about the importance of self-awareness, introspection without judgment, and remembering our true nature as love. That's the key. Our true nature is love. So I'd love to hear from you about the episode. What hit home for you? What are you thinking about when you listen to this episode, and how will it help you? Make sure you download the episode, subscribe, reach out to us on Instagram. All the links will be in the show notes, and we look forward to hearing from you. Enjoy the show. Hi, Edward. Thank you so much for joining me on the Emotional Eats podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Me too. So for the listeners, I have been following you for a while, and I love your peaceful way of sharing information and helping us learn to be more aware and more ourselves. And I also was able to read most of your book. And so what I'd love for the listeners to hear from you is a little bit of that background, like what led you to this point, and we'll really dig into the deeper things that you've transformed into and what you're sharing with everyone. But give us a little update
Yeah.
on from then to now.
Well, I've been a seeker, like a lot of spiritual-minded people. I've been a seeker my whole life. I remember reading all the right books and going to all the right seminars and workshops, and I had a lot of teachers in the process of the last 30 years that have been inspirational for me. About 15 years ago, I had a very successful business. I was overwhelmed with my very successful business, and I always felt like I was struggling, emotionally struggling. And even though everything in my life appeared to be going very well, I was emotionally overwrought. I was just, I used to, every night I'd get home from my business and I would come home and I would drink until I was relaxed enough to fall asleep. Because until then I'd sit in the bed and think all night. So I needed to find some techniques that were, And I had been a meditator, and meditating was a beautiful, it still is a beautiful tool that I use now. But my mind didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to slow it down. I didn't know how um, to relax. So what I did is that I tried meditation, I tried alcohol, and then I learned a practice that changed my life. And this is about maybe 15 so years ago. I learned about the Ho'oponopono, which I think, as far as practices go, I think it's the most transformative practice because it really made a big impact on me almost immediately. Almost immediately, I started realizing that the relationship I had with myself was the only relationship that mattered and the only relationship I needed to work on. So I really, and Ho'oponopono is a mantra. The mantra is, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. So again, it's I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. Now, that mantra is not something that you are speaking to about the world. There's nothing in the world you're claiming love for. There's nothing you're asking for forgiveness for. The relationship's with yourself. You learn to develop an intimate, loving, compassionate relationship with yourself. And it's a very introspective process because you're always being aware of the thoughts and the emotions that are being triggered in the moment. You realize that all that really exists is inside you, and that the world out there is a reflection of what you're experiencing in yourself. So when I learned that, and I learned it in the way that I learned it, because I got deep into Ho'oponopono. I had talked to a number of teachers about it, and I had found out how transformative for me. Then I realized what it was doing. It was relating to my subconscious programming. It was related to all that trauma, all that woundedness as a child. It was creating space for a healing. It was teaching me to be more compassionate with my stories. Ho'oponopono changed the way I related to all my stories of trauma, which everybody has stories of trauma. But it changed my relationship to those stories. And it gave me opportunities to see things because it creates awareness. It gave me opportunities to see things in a new way. And that's kind of where I
That's,
went. So I went
yes.
from non-duality. I mean, I went from Ho'oponopono, and I was still evolving, because Ho'oponopono creates more space and to see things differently and more spaciously. And I got very interested in non-duality because Ho'oponopono is a non-dual teaching. It teaches you that who we are is zero. At our core, we're just zero. And that's kind of what non-duality teaches, is that only, your mind is always active, but it's not who you are. Your persona is always engaged, but it's not who you are. All your identities that you've taken on through the years, they're not who you are. And who you are is conscious awareness. So when you start to become aware that who you are is not the persona, not the identities, not even the memories, that who you are is the space, it gives you another opportunity to correct your bad thinking or your limited thinking. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. And it really
Yes, it's
takes you,
faulty.
yeah, I
Mhm.
think it's faulty. And it takes you right to the space. And the space is the heart to me. It's the heart. It's the love. And you start to relate to everything and everybody as love. And it changes your whole point of view about the world. It's improved my relationships with my family. It's improved my relationships in business. It has improved my relationships with myself in particularly because I'm so much kinder to myself now. Through those years when I was tormented, I was harsh and judgmental, and um, I was very, uh, disapproving of myself. And Ho'oponopono and non-duality gives you another way of seeing things. It gives you another relationship to have with that self, that wounded self.
That is so
That's
powerful.
kind of how it started with me.
I There's so many places to go with this. And I want to start with the self-talk
Yeah.
because I know that the beginning is understanding the non-duality and the awareness. But women in particular who are listening, who have spent years of talking to themselves in a certain way, feeling like they've failed, feeling like they have to people please, feeling like they've failed physically at diets, people who've gotten divorced. There's so many thoughts in how we speak to ourselves. So, where would you help someone begin? Because maybe this goes back, and you can tell me, maybe this goes back to after the awareness,
Yeah.
self-love. And how would we even begin
Let me
to
just tell
learn
you,
that?
my short story is that I was a fat kid and I used to eat to make me happy. And I believe that a good time was having all the food I wanted that I could consume and feel good about it. I remember I was a paper boy and I didn't make much money as a paper boy, but I'd work hard and from Chicago, I'd march through the snow and at the end of every week, I would get a little bit of money, maybe like $4 for my work. But I would take that right to the corner store and buy bags and bags of chips. And I would sit there and I'd be so happy. So food felt relief to me. It felt like comfort to me. Um, and then over the years, I grew up in America and we realized that, food is being marketed to us as being things that make you happy. Food is a good time, it's a loving time, it's special. So I grew up with all these ideas, all this programming about food. And I realized that my relationship with food was that I loved it. I loved food. It meant something to me. Certain kinds of foods, being a foodie, having special food and going to special places to get food. It all meant so much to me. And I realized as I became more non-dual, as I became more self-loving, that I had an odd relationship with food because my relationship with food kept me always chasing losing weight. It always kept me chasing my identity of being a fat boy. And that's what I was called as a kid, fat boy. And I wanted a new relationship with food. So I wasn't always in stress and anxiety over what I had to eat, if I was able to eat, where I ate, all those kinds of stories. So I think that my spiritual evolution changed and my changed relationship I had with food. It made me realize that food is beautiful, but it can't make you happy. It can't solve any of your problems. It doesn't even really comfort you for long. For a moment you're feeling like, oh, this is good stuff. I'm so happy. And then the ego takes that and turns it into shame. The fat of shame. Look at me, I ate too much.
Yes.
I don't want to eat like this. So I think that as I evolved, and I evolved in many ways besides food, but food was a big deal for me because it was my comfort. I tell the story, I grew up in a harsh environment. I had one of those harsh mothers that was kind of very critical. So food was my way of going someplace in the basement, maybe, someplace that nobody would be around me and I would just eat. And I remember how happy it made me feel. And I had to realize that I was happy without food. I had to realize that who I was happy, who my identity is space, is happy, it's non-conditioned, it's open, it's loving. And once I realized that, food changed in how I looked at it, how I related to it, how I saw food change too. And maybe because I had such an intimate relationship with it, in my youth. And now I'm 67 years old and I don't have obsessive thoughts about food much anymore. But I did for a long time. Um, uh, I was always planning my next meal. I don't even think about, I don't, my biggest complaint is not from my wife is that I don't think about food enough. You know what I mean? I'm always
That's quite a
forgetting.
change.
Well, I know I'm always forgetting to eat, which is not good either. But
That is a really special story. And I know a lot of people will resonate with that because we use things to comfort. It was even like what you said, coming home from work. And I had done that in the past, also having a glass of wine, drinking alcohol. Food was still also something that I really thought I enjoyed temporarily. And again, you mentioned the shame, and I love how you attach that to the ego. And it's really sad because I think we're fighting a twofold situation, losing our relationship with ourselves or not ever feeling like we have it as we get older. We go from kids to adults and we are so impressionable with the world and our subconscious. But then the other side of it is, like you said, we're being marketed to. And these highly palatable foods are very hard to stay away from because, of course, they give you a hit of dopamine and serotonin. It's great. It takes
Well,
care of all your trouble for a minute.
it does. If you watch TV and you watch movies, the happiest times on the movies, the romantic times in the movies are people eating food and having meals and
Yep.
enjoying large abundance. And you know what's very interesting? This issue with food is kind of an American issue too. A lot of countries, they don't, other countries, food is necessary. It's a ritual. They eat it in order to make their body strong, but it isn't about happiness. And we've
Yes.
made food about being happy.
And we
Got
don't
it.
use it connecting as much either anymore.
Exactly.
I
So
agree.
non-duality gave me a chance to look at what happy was, because I was seeking happiness. And I realized that happiness could not be out there. It couldn't be in the world. It had to be a relationship I had with myself. And wow, when you get that, when you really get that and you find your self-talk being changing, you become very consciously aware of the negative things you say about yourself. You it it is such a freeing once you realize that you're addicted to patterns that are not loving to you, and that you can change those patterns just by letting them go. Just release. Okay, there I go again. There I go saying those nasty things about myself. There I go, that feeling of shame that comes up when I'm thinking about food or overeating. So it's been a process. And as I said before, I'm in my 60s now, and it really didn't kick in until I was in my 50s of how I could relate to food differently.
Well,
I,
it is never too late.
I, I did live a
uh,
whole lifetime struggling with food also.
wow.
Yeah.
So it's interesting too. You were talking about this letting go, and it's challenging when I think we do wait till we get to our 50s. We don't wait. It's just sometimes it presents itself finally, in our midlife, where when you talk about, for example, someone in your past being extremely critical, a parent, someone you needed approval from, and I see so many women, I've done it myself. I grew up being that person who was mediating, people pleasing, solving problems before they came up to avoid conflict. And I think when you can be free, like you're talking about, I can just imagine then you're not worrying about this weight of what everyone thinks about you.
But the biggest thing that I think happened is I changed how I related to me. Um, I was entertained with making negative statements about me. I remember that. I remember, oh well, I can't, always overeat. I had to make it a joke. Oh, I'm just not. My issue was smart, not so much weight loss. I was always concerned that I wasn't smart enough, and that everybody is smart was out there in the world, and I was just not that. So life meant for me to change my relationship with myself. I needed to change how I related to food and how I related to um, uh, my intelligence. I thought I was not smart enough. And that kept me stuck in a whole bunch of stories too. It kept me stuck in always seeking something from out there in the world to validate me. I was seeking people's acceptance, because if people accepted me, then I would be maybe I was enough, you know. But non-duality has chopped that stuff up. It's had me realize that I can't be inadequate. It's impossible. It's actually impossible.
Wow.
It's actually impossible that I could be an addict, that I could be um, um, any description that I want to put on me can't be true. Because what I truly am in my core, at my essence, is conscious awareness. And once you become aware of that, you start taking your attention from the thought, the belief, the story, to the truth of your nature, to the truth of conscious awareness, to recognizing that conscious awareness is love. It's not only love for yourself, it's love for everything. And it's transformative.
And that's powerful.
It is
Before
powerful.
we talk about love, I want to share you just hit something with me. You hit a good nerve with me. I have been the same way with the intelligence. Always feeling like I had to have the right answer, always feeling like I had to hide if I didn't know the answer or my weaknesses. I could only show my strengths. So I have, gone to college, got a master's, all these different things. But when I became a nutritional health coach, I was a high school math teacher also. So it never was enough. And
Yeah.
then I even found myself not too long ago thinking I needed this certification and this certification, like all the things after my name, because it wasn't just enough for me to be me,
Exactly.
and the awareness and the love for me and just the love for my clients and love for other people. But I want to hit on this love thing. It makes me also think about that we are not separate from each other at all.
I agree. Yeah, we're all one. Well, that's the non-dual point we're making. I'm looking at you and I'm not, and I can tie all kinds of stories about you, but the truth of you is that you're me. You're a representation of my belief structure. You're a representation of what I'm believing. And when you throw love in there and you realize that I love her, she's my heart too. She, every when you start to look at the world from love, everybody seems worthy of your love. From the worst enemies to people on the street, to any time there's an opportunity to see yourself in someone else is a real loving way to treat yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's an interesting exercise that I do with women that is more about the physical body than it is about the love that we actually share in this space. And I share with women when they're on the beach, for example, or they have to be out in a bathing suit or they're feeling uncomfortable, to notice all the other women's bodies and to notice how much you don't judge them and you love on them and you're sending all these women love. But then I ask them in the end to turn that love back and know that that love's coming back to them.
Yeah.
And it's a very physical example, but it keeps everybody together. We're not competing, we're not wishing, we're not comparing. I guess comparing is
Well, the
really
mind is going to do that. The mind is going to always compare and contrast. That's what the mind
mm,
does. What you have to be aware of is you're not your mind. And when you're at the beach and you're feeling inadequate and you're seeing all that beauty out there and you're seeing inadequacy in you, you have to remember these are just thoughts. There's nothing to bear. There's nothing to cling to. There's nothing to understand or fix. It's just sun and space and heart and peace. And that if you can relate to that part of yourself, all that, contrast and they're like this and I want to look like this and all that stuff kind of diminishes. And also, what happens once that diminishes, you realize that all these beautiful people that you see out there in the world that are not you are you. They really are
mm.
you. I used to believe as though, as I said, my big issue was intelligence. I used to feel as though everybody was smarter than me. Everybody. So I had to hire all these experts and these highly intelligent, degreed people in order to work for me. And I ended up firing them anyway because they were really smarter than me. But I believed they were. That was my pattern. And that was actually my sabotaging pattern. I was always looking for expertise out in the world, and it ended up that I was the expert. But I had to be willing to see that.
Yes. Can we talk about that? Because you talk about the saboteur in your book.
Yes.
What is that exactly?
Well,
And why do we do it?
well, we do it because we have our egos are always alive and active, and the saboteur is just a part of you that is going to always bring you back down to reality, bring you out of your flow, and it's usually some pattern that you live by. My pattern was is that I take on big projects, big intentions. I open up charter schools, I'd open up businesses, and I would have the intention on doing them and being successful at them, but I always felt inside that there was something about me that was insufficient and it really couldn't do this and really couldn't accomplish it. And that I had to, but one good thing about me is I would always find the talent to make it happen. So I would be in search for this talent. And whenever you're in search for something in the world to be enough, and you're diminishing, it's always a case of it's always going to turn sour on you. And it always turns sour on me. I always had great hopes for people. You know what I mean? You have, oh, they're so special, they're so ideal. And the reality was I was diminishing myself, making somebody else ideal, and then having to feel the shame of them letting me down or disappointing me. So it was a cycle. And I think that's how the saboteur works. It comes in, plays its cycle, and it leaves you depleted. And I think that everybody needs to look at patterns like that in their life, where they find themselves always at the same place over and over again. And it's usually some sabotaging belief that's keeping them stuck in a dream. And truly a self-aware person is always looking at behaviors and thoughts and dreams, and they're always looking at that, but they're looking at it from within themselves. They're being introspective about themselves without judgment. So a lot of times people are introspective, but then they're, oh, I shouldn't be like that. I don't want to be like that. Oh, that's wrong. I should be more like this. And that's when it gets really tricky. That's when it gets tricky. That's when we're actually deluded. And to be truly loving beings, we've got to root out all that negative thought. Root it out. And it's not easy to do, because let me tell you we have to go against our nature sometimes. Our nature is used to being judgmental of ourselves and others.
Oh,
Our nature,
yes.
our nature is always to find something wrong. But when you start to root out all of that bad thinking, that judgmental thinking, that shameful thinking, you're able, and what I mean by root it out by being aware of it. You don't have to do anything with it, but be aware of it. Once you become aware of it, you have a new opportunity to choose how to see it. You know what I mean? You have a new way of looking. You have the opportunity to see it in a new way.
And you can't unknow what you know when you become aware.
But you can be
Trust
aware.
me.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the truth.
Oh, wow. I love that. You know what I'd love to ask you about too? There's something that I love in the book that you talk about, because I think this is something we all really fall into, is the idea of resistance and suffering. And can you speak to, why we suffer? Because that word resistance was really powerful for me. And it seems like such a strong word. And I don't think we realize how much we resist in every aspect, though, emotionally, physically, everything. So
Yeah.
can you talk to that?
Well, resistance is a great thing. Remember, we were talking about introspection, becoming aware of what we're believing, what we're caught in, what we're, falling into, what kind of dreams we're having. If you are really aware, if you're really dreaming loving, you've got to be consciously aware of even what you're in resistance to, even what you're believing that's keeping you stuck. Because resistance isn't wrong, it's just unnecessary. Because what's truth is that we're loving beings. And that's the truth. That is the truth. But we go into these modes of wanting things our way, or somehow feeling as though things are not quite right, judging the world as being insufficient, as a scary place. So as a result of it, we have to have our boundaries of control that make the world, safer for us. But in doing that, all we're doing is creating more resistance and more suffering for ourselves. In these political times right now, people are taking sides. They're either progressive or they're liberal, and they're going to fight about it. And somebody is always wrong. I believe as though this is a good time for us to become aware of that and how much suffering that brings to the mind. And that if you decide that you want to be free of even that suffering, the political suffering that's going on in our country right now, you can be free of it. You can be open to seeing things in both ways. And that's powerful. You no longer have to hold on to your ideas and your values, which aren't real anyway. You can, allow yourself to see things in a different way. And that's when you can get out of the suffering. You can be prepared for even seeing it in a completely different way than you see it. Self-awareness is always taking you to higher levels of understanding, higher levels of love. higher levels of inclusiveness, of oneness.
That's powerful. When we talk about resistance and letting go of that control, what are some of the things that you believe that people hang on to that control for? Where's that coming from? Is there a
Their program.
fear?
No, I think it's their programming. For example, I'm a black man, and I've been told that as a black man, this is what I'm all about. This is my lineage. This is my family. This is my history. This is all the things that have happened to black men, and I have to relate to that. I have to relate to that. So as a result, when I look out in the world, and there's challenge to that, there's challenge to those ideas of me as a black man, I then have to be defensive and fearful. And I'm saying that I don't think that's always the right way to respond. I know that we have to um, continue to move toward a greater society, but I also know that we don't have to personalize anything. Nothing has to be about me. That ego that needs to be protected, defended, and preserved. It just doesn't have to go that way. We can be aware without having to take on any of the shame and resistance of the world. Awareness is all about being aware and not being resistant. Yeah.
That's powerful. And I think of programming as glasses that we're wearing that are kind of foggy. And when you
Yes.
take the glasses off and you clean them up, all of a sudden you see things from almost like a child's perspective again, because you have not been throughout our lives, we make so many decisions and we go in so many directions based on that programming.
Absolutely.
And you said the same thing when we I love when you talk about personalizing this. We bring it all back to us.
Yes.
And I think when we let go of resistance, that there are many times that it's not letting go of, we think it's letting go of who we are. But if we don't really know who we are and have all these identities, we're really not letting go. That sounds kind of like a circle when I said that, but does that
Oh, but
make
I understand
sense?
exactly what this. Absolutely. When
uh,
you realize how programmed we are, how um, how much we've taken on as far as identity, how we've allowed our history and our past to define who we are today. We realize how heavy that is. And if
that's
you,
heavy.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's heavy. And it's not who we are. And there's no love there. There's lots of stories, but there's no real love there. There's no real opportunity to connect with someone's heart. All there is walls and distractions and judgment. And it's just, if we want to evolve and we want to see things in a more loving way, and we want the world to evolve in that way, we have to be that too. We have to be that. And when it comes to eating, I really believe that we have to think of ourselves, our bodies, as something to love too. And that we have to be consciously aware of how we're going to give our bodies nutrition, how we're going to take best care of our bodies, how we're going to not love our bodies and love the way, I like these muscles, I like my face. I love our bodies by feeding it the best food we can find, um, the best exercise for our bodies to strengthen our bodies as we age. Doing things that are intentionally loving without, calling, well, that way is wrong. No, there's no way that's wrong. Whatever you nurtures your body and nurtures your heart, it's right. It's beautiful.
Thank you for going there, because I think that is another part of the resistance that we have is there are camps of things that we are so marketed to with diets, with the right way to eat, the wrong way to eat. And it gets very confusing because we're not paying attention to our own unique selves and what feels good. And
Exactly.
we know what we need to be doing. A lot of times I'll work with people and I'll ask them, what do you think you need to be doing? And they may need some help on understanding new research or new science.
Yes.
But the bottom line is No one has walked in that didn't have a couple ideas of what would be good, but they heard somewhere they
Yes.
shouldn't eat this. They heard somewhere or they read somewhere. And so it convolutes the entire process of taking care of themselves and listening. And so I love when you talk about that. What is the best thing for us? And I think consciously nourishing our bodies rather than beating ourselves up for everything that slips in that we shouldn't have, maybe having a little more intention on loving ourselves
Yeah,
through those different ways. Love doesn't just have to be going and getting a massage and having a bubble bath. And, we think of these things as self-care.
going out for a great deep dish pizza like they have in Chicago. It doesn't have to be.
Exactly. But it is,
It doesn't
food
have
has become the easiest,
to.
fastest way to take care of ourselves. And I appreciate you bringing that up, even just what we need to do for our bodies as we age and taking care of ourselves, because there is a point where I think when we haven't connected deeply with ourselves, we give up and we just are like, this is just aging. This is just what it is. And it's okay to not have resistance to some things. But when we just say that, that's more giving up. It's not resistance to getting better. It's I'm just done. I'm over it.
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing
Mhm.
you. My greatest resistance right now is aging. I find myself putting a lot of resistance to this concept of deterioration. I watched my father go from being this strong, successful man who seemed to have control over things in his life. And as he got older, he diminished. And I think that somehow got in my programming that getting old means diminishing. And and because of that programming that exists, I'm constantly counteracting that programming with a new idea, with loving ideas. And thinking of my father as the hero that he was, instead of some diminished old man that died sick and broken up, because he lived a beautiful life, and I don't want to bear his aging in my spirit. Do you know what I'm saying? Because
Oh,
he
we
was
take that though. We do pull
too.
that in. Yes. Oh, well, he sounds wonderful because he obviously passed on some good things to
Yes,
you.
yes.
I love what you just said about aging because we have a resistance. And I so appreciate you as a man talking about this, knowing that a lot of our audience is women, but we are all, again, we're all the same. And but the resistance to aging and the pressure societally on one side to look a certain way, but then on the other side that we don't, not everybody has the knowledge to keep their bodies strong and knowing what they need to do. And I think the resistance, it's funny because I have the same resistance. I know there's better. I know that we have an opportunity to love our bodies even more than people knew how to do before. And so that's where this, I feel like there's a great place, and you can and tell me what you think about this. We are inside ourselves and we need to be us and that space, but then we can also bring in, we still can bring in outside sources to learn to do that.
Well, first of all, let me say self-love is a process. It's not a destination. It's a continual, day by day, week by week, moment by moment awareness of how we're relating to ourselves. And there's always opportunities to be kinder. There's always opportunities to be more compassionate, more thoughtful, more aware of the stories that we tell ourselves that aren't loving and kind and generous. We need to be aware of that. And that's a moment by moment. Some days you wake up and you're all over yourself. All the wrongs of the world are all over you, and you're bearing them. And then you have to deconstruct that. You say, is there really anything wrong here? Is there anything that I'm doing wrong, or that I don't know, or that I'm looking for? And you have to go back to that conscious awareness place, that place of zero, that place of love. You have to always be going back there. I call it the remembering process. We always have to remember the truth of our nature. Always. Whenever the ego or the mind or the persona gets engaged, we've got to remember who we truly are, moment by moment. And that's an evolutionary, lifelong destination. It's not something you get to like that. And I consider myself a happy person now. I'm happy. But I wasn't happy for a long time because I was always looking for, as you said, better, more ideal. And then I gave that up and I realized I was better and most ideal. And that's who I am. And then once I started relating to that, and as I said before, it's not believing it, relating to that idea, it started changing me and changing my relationships. I could feel when resistance came up. I could feel myself getting caught up in a dream that was just a dream. Because the dreams will always evoke certain shame or doubt or fear. The dreams are always going to target those. But when you're healing yourself and loving yourself, you're giving yourself a chance. You're giving yourself a moment. You're remembering the truth of your nature. And that's the process. There is no other process.
Yes. And
Yeah,
there's no end point. This is a
no,
journey that is a
yeah,
daily, hourly, minute by minute journey. It really is. I'm not even close, but I love having these conversations because I think they're meant to be so
don't say it
that we can be
might
reminded.
be, it might be already there.
I
That's what I
am
had to
a
tell you.
work in progress.
That's what I used to tell myself too, but maybe you're all that there is.
That's what I would, yes, that's what I would like to believe. And
Maybe
it's not
that's
believe, it's like you said, the relating to. I
yes,
would like
yes.
to relate to that.
Remember, I said a moment ago that it's a moment by moment awareness. Some days we're not going to
Mhm.
feel it at all. Some days we're going to be stuck in our inadequacies. But we have to go back to the memory, the remembering process,
Yes.
go back to the truth of ourselves. But we also have to be careful, like you're saying, the language. I mean, you're saying, well, I'm not quite there yet. Well, maybe, why not? Why aren't you there yet? You
That's
know,
exactly yep, you've caught me in that process because it's a moment by moment process and
yeah,
some days it seems like you can be right on track. And
yeah,
I've noticed too, this is a connection that I make when I am relating more to myself as a whole being that is just fine the way Kim is. You're just fine the way you are. This is you and the love that you feel for yourself. You're going to let that out to everybody else. That's one moment. The days when I feel the inadequacies, the inadequacies, the imposter syndrome, the things that I'm picking on about myself, I all of a sudden start seeing things in other people more. And I think
yes.
there's a direct connection between how we feel and love ourselves and how we are going to go into the world because we're so broken that if we are broken, we can only relate to other people and mirror that.
Also can be aware of how you describe yourself. No, I'm serious because
No,
uh,
I'm listening.
I would start describing because you are an enlightened being. There's no question about that. Because you wouldn't be doing this podcast if you weren't an enlightened being. You're bringing light and love to the planet. Isn't that your intention?
That is my intention.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that to me proves that you're an enlightened being. Your mind is just like anybody else's mind. They go all over the place. They believe all kind of crazy stuff. But at the end of the day, Kim, you know the truth of yourself, that you're here to love. And as a result of that, that's what you do. You're going to touch hearts. You're going to inspire people. So be careful of how you talk about yourself. I think it's time for Kim to start saying, I'm an enlightened being. I'm an enlightened being instead of I'm a work in progress. You know, I, can you kind of relate to what I'm saying?
I can relate. I am an enlightened being.
Yes, you are an enlightened being. You are,
Well, folks, you're hearing it here. We're having a session. And I appreciate it because
yeah,
that is my intention.
yeah,
You
it
see
is.
my intention, and
Yes,
because you are all love, you can see that more clearly sometimes in people than they can even in themselves.
absolutely.
Thank you for that. So I appreciate the conversation around the food and around comforting ourselves and the body image and the identities that we hold on to. Because when we can love ourselves, and I think self-love is so, for some people, it's still, I know this concept is so out there and so hard to imagine without doing some work on it, which again, I really recommend people reading your book. And we are going to talk about that as and when we close out, because it was so nice to have it in words that I could reread and see over and over again, because again, this is daily work. And I would love to go back when we talk about food and happiness and bringing ourselves happiness to the idea that we think sometimes that contentment and happiness is so elusive.
Yeah.
Even on a bad day, I feel like when I read this book, I felt like even on I'm going to put in air quotes actually for everyone, bad day, we can find joy.
Yeah, we can. We can. But I do know it's a process. I've gotten to a point where I've stopped seeing wrong, and I started, and I think it had to do with the Ho'oponopono. And I'm going to go back to that because I want your audience to really understand how to use that Ho'oponopono to heal your heart. As we talked about, thoughts are going to come up all the time. Beliefs, thoughts, triggers, sensations. You're going to have all of them, and they're all going to sometimes take you into beliefs. To what do I call them? Cycles of thinking. What the Ho'oponopono does is it cuts to the quick. Please forgive me. Please forgive me for believing there's anything besides love. Please forgive me. There's anything outside of me that's not perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the awareness. I love you. I love you. And once you start to relate to that, the love is here. Love is here in your heart. And you can cut right to the quick. And the Ho'oponopono is about getting to zero, becoming aware that you are zero. So I'm suggesting to your audience to always stay intimate with yourself, intentionally intimate with yourself. And the Ho'oponopono is a beautiful tool for that. Your
I
beautiful tool
love that.
for responding to your subconscious, your unconscious program that sometimes is, brutal. Because it's going to come up.
Absolutely.
It's going to come up. You're going to see the judgment, and you can then let it go in love. Release it in love. But if you don't release it in love, you know what sometimes happens? We start believing the crap. We take it on. We call it true. As soon as we call it true, we're stuck in it, right? Yeah.
Yes. We are misguided by what we think is true.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, I have to try to say the word. Say the Hawaiian term again for me.
Ho'oponopono.
Ho'oponopono.
There you go.
All
That,
right. I was waiting for you to bring it up because I was afraid to say it.
just remember there's a ho before the Ho'oponopono.
Oponopono. Ho'oponopono. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is so powerful. And just, I love you. I'm sorry. I
Me
forgive
too.
you.
Thank you.
That's such a release,
It is.
and it's wonderful. And I think anywhere anyone is spiritually, whether it's universe, God, yourself, this all can be intertwined. And I think that's super powerful.
Well, you
And
always remember that the please forgive me and I'm sorry has more to do with not the world. The world is beautiful and perfect. The please forgive me and I'm sorry is with how your mind is relating to something that's not even real. How your mind is taking on beliefs that don't even exist. So please forgive me. Allow me back to the natural state that I am, the natural state of zero, the natural state of conscious awareness. Allow me back to remembering the truth of my nature. And that, because I've been doing it so long, becomes automatic. I'm always going there. I'm always realizing I'm stuck in my mind and I can go back to the truth. And the more you do that, the more it becomes your new habit, your new self-talk.
ooh, that's powerful because we tend to have anxious thoughts and we're constantly thinking about the past or the future. And that brings you right back to right now and the truth.
Yeah, it does. And just think
Mm.
of when you're caught up in your stories and you're feeling anxiety from your patterns and your negative stories, that you can clean all that away in a moment. You don't have to see your psychiatrist. You don't have to get electric shock treatment. You don't need to take a pill. You can go right back to the truth of your nature, right back to the truth, and forgive yourself for feeling things, forgive yourself for, sensations that come up, because all that changes as you become more free. All that evolves as you become more heartfelt. So, I think that, I'm all about, and if you read the book is about establishing a new relationship with yourself, not with anybody else, with yourself, your whole, complete, and loving self.
And it's so powerful because the more, as we've talked, this is not the first thing I've been working on with myself with your book, as you know. But I was just thinking when I was reading the book how it can change your world. Anything can be happening around you, and you are so centered because your relationship with yourself, as you said, that's the first point.
Yeah.
And everything else it's happening, and it doesn't necessarily, you said something so powerful earlier, it's not right or wrong.
Oh, there's
It's
no.
just is. And that's where that we can let go and that suffering goes away when it
Yes.
just
Yeah.
is.
You said something interesting. It's not right or wrong. Once you get rid of right or wrong and you start accepting what is, you realize that there's a more in your favor than you think there is. Things are really not against you. The against is your idea of how you think things should be.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just your
Absolutely.
traps, your patterns, your cycles. And the more awareness you put on that, the more zero you put on that, the more non-duality of conscious awareness you put on, the more you're able to let it go. Okay, there I go again. There I go again. Thank you for that awareness. Yeah.
I love that. So, Edward, I am so thankful that you are here today, and I really would love for everyone to be able to find you. Can you please tell everyone where they can find you and the name of your book?
In my book. Okay. The company is Soul Transync, SoulTransync, Soul Transync, and it's .com. You go to the website, you can read about, the practice. Um, you can also download some meditations. I have a wonderful inner child meditation. I mean, wonderful inner child meditation. And I recommend everybody do inner child work because it's an important thing to develop an intimate relationship with your innocent self. It's a really important thing. And I think that inner child meditation opens the door to that. So, so then you can also see my TikTok videos, are just little short vignettes, and Instagram, and I've got some YouTube stuff going on, but it's all under Soul Transync, is the brand.
Perfect. And I'm going to put all of that in the show notes for everyone. And before we sign off, do you have a couple tips that you could give to our listeners to just get started on this journey? Obviously, buy the book would be tip number one, but do you have a couple other things that we can leave everyone with?
Yeah, you know what? I think we as human beings need to take our interest out of the effect, the world, what it's doing, what is going wrong, what's going right, what I believe, and start putting more of attention on yourself, on your inner self. And your inner self are your feelings, your emotions, what you're believing, and become less judgmental about it and aware that it's just a thought, it's just a belief, there's nothing wrong. I think that's the essence of what I'm trying to get people to do, to relate to themselves in a more loving way, become aware of judgment, become aware of their thoughts that keep them stuck in holes that they can't feel they can crawl out of.
Perfect. Edward, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you so much for bringing the love.
Very pleased to.
And everyone out there, please give yourself grace today. That's it. Thank you so much for tuning into the Emotional Eats podcast, the podcast that's here to help you feel amazing, strong, energetic, and healthy holistically in your mind and your body. But my guest and I also want to help you build great habits to help you with long-term mental and physical health so that you can lean into aging in a very positive and strong way. Check out my website, kimhines.com, and please come see me on Instagram at kimhineshealth. That's where I leave tips for healthy life, healthy body, healthy relationship with food, and I also am there to encourage you, and I love to hear from you. So tag me and let me know what you like about the show and what you want to hear more about. Check out the show notes for all the details. Make sure to rate and review the podcast. And until our next time together, nourish your entire life and give yourself grace today.